Right. So like, imagine a classroom.
Yeah.
Right. And you get to kind of like steer the ship. I'm talking choosing your resources and figuring out how to, how you'll prove you've learned something.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a choose your own adventure for education. And that's what self-directed learning is all about.
Yeah. And what's really interesting is that it's not, brand new. This whole idea of self-directed learning, it's been around for ages. And it's especially relevant now, with how fast everything is changing.
So let's break this down a little. What exactly is self-directed learning? Because it sounds, pretty empowering, but I'm guessing there's more to it than just saying, hey, go learn whatever you want.
Right. Yeah, you're right. There's definitely more to it. Basically, self-directed learning means that the student is really in charge of their learning. Like they decide what they want to learn and why they want to learn it, and then like how they're going to go about actually learning it. They set their own goals, choose their own ways of learning, and even like, check their own progress.
Okay, so then what happens to the teacher in this scenario? Do they just like step back?
Yeah.
And let everyone just, run wild?
No, not at all. The teacher is still super important, but their role kind of changes. They're not just like standing at the front and lecturing. They're more like a guide, like, on the side. They're there to like support students and give them advice and make sure that they're on the right track. But they're not like telling them every single thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So like they become more of a mentor, a coach, something like that. But how do you make sure that that the students are actually learning like, real valuable things?
Yeah, it's not about, just letting things go crazy. There still needs to be like clear learning goals. Teachers help students figure out what they want to achieve and how they're going to measure their progress. Think of it like, I don't know, like the teacher gives them a map and a compass, but the student, gets to pick which path to take and how fast to go.
Okay, yeah. Starting to see how this all comes together. And it seems like self-directed learning could be a really, really good way to like motivate students. Because I mean, who wouldn't be more into it if they had a say in what they were learning and how they were learning it?
Exactly. And there's actually research to back that up. Studies show that when students, when they have more control over their learning, their motivation just like shoots way up. It's not about pleasing the teacher anymore or getting a good grade. It's really about just the joy of discovering new stuff and reaching goals that they set for themselves.
Yeah, that's awesome. But it's got to be more than just like feeling good, right? I mean, like there must be some real tangible benefits to this.
Yeah.
In terms of what students actually learn and the skills they pick up, right?
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. When you're calling the shots on your learning, you have to think critically and you have to like solve problems, manage your time, maybe even work with other people. And these are all skills that are, super valuable in the real world, whether you go to college or, straight into a job.
So it's not just like acing tests. It's about developing skills that are going to help them succeed and, in pretty much anything they do. But okay, so let's be honest, like there are going to be some challenges to making this work in a classroom, right?
Yeah, of course. There are definitely some hurdles. And one of the biggest ones is that it isn't like some kind of quick fix. It requires a lot from both teachers and students. Like teachers need to really understand their students on a deeper level. And they also need to be really good at creating a learning environment that's flexible and can support all this individual exploration.
Right. And from the student side, I imagine it takes a certain amount of maturity and self-discipline, right? To do well with self-directed learning. Because not everyone is like naturally comfortable with that much freedom and responsibility.
Exactly. And that's a really important point. Student readiness is key. Some students, they might like really thrive on the autonomy, but others, they might feel lost or overwhelmed without more more structure. So teachers really need to like assess their students carefully and provide, different levels of support and what we call scaffolding, basically. It's like, think of it like learning to ride a bike. You wouldn't just throw someone on a bike without training wheels if they've never ridden before.
That's a good analogy. So how do you actually put this into practice in a classroom? Are there frameworks or like models that teachers can use to really bring self-directed learning to life?
Absolutely. There are a bunch of different frameworks that can help both learners and teachers, use this approach effectively. One popular one is the what we call the 4-step process, which focuses on the learner's journey.
Okay, I'm curious now. Let's hear about those 4 steps. What's the first one?
So the first step is all about assessing readiness. It means students have to honestly think about their strengths and weaknesses, what kind of learners they are, and just their overall readiness for more independent study. It's like taking stock of your learning toolkit before you set off on a big adventure.
Okay, so it's like getting to know yourself as a learner before you jump into something new. That makes sense.
Yeah.
What's the next step then?
All right, so once students have a good understanding of where they're at, then they move on to setting learning goals. And these goals, they got to be specific, and meaningful to them personally. It can't just be something copied from a textbook or, whatever.
Okay, so instead of saying, I want to learn about history, they might say something like, I want to research, I don't know, the impact of the Industrial Revolution on my hometown or something specific like that.
Exactly. The more specific and personal the goals are, the more motivated they're going to be to actually achieve them. And that brings us to step 3, which is engaging in the learning process. This is where students really get to put on their explore hats and choose their own path, pick their resources, design their own learning activities, maybe collaborate with others.
So it's a mix of freedom and structure. It sounds pretty cool, actually. And I bet there are some amazing aha moments that happen along the way, huh? Yeah. So what's the final step in this process?
All right, so the final step is evaluating learning. And this is more than just, finishing a project or taking a test. It's about reflecting on the whole experience, what they've learned, how they've grown, and maybe even identifying areas where they might need more work.
So it's not just about the destination, it's about the whole journey and what you learn along the way. That's pretty deep, actually. But I know there are other frameworks out there besides this 4-step one. Mm-hmm. Right? Can you tell us about one more before we wrap up this part of the discussion?
Sure. There's another one that's really valuable, and it focuses on the teacher's role in empowering learners. It's got 6 steps that can help teachers create an environment that really supports self-directed learning.
Okay, let's hear about those 6 steps. What's the first one?
So step 1 is helping students set what we call SMART goals. Those are goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
So we're talking about concrete, actionable goals that they can really track and achieve, not just, vague wishes. Okay, what about the next step?
Okay, step 2 is all about defining assessment methods. So this is working with the students to figure out how they'll show what they've learned and how their progress is going to be evaluated. And it really emphasizes student ownership. They're not just waiting for a grade from the teacher, they're actually involved in deciding how they're going to prove their understanding.
I like it. That's really putting the power back in their hands.
Yeah.
What's step 3?
Step 3 is structuring activities. Yeah. So this doesn't mean creating a rigid schedule, but it does mean providing students with a framework, a set of activities and experiences that align with those learning goals, but still allowing for, flexibility and choice. It's kind of like creating a learning playground, where there are clear boundaries, but lots of room to explore.
Okay, yeah, I'm seeing that balance between structure and freedom, which seems really, really important. So what about the last 3 steps? What are those?
Okay. Step 4 is setting timelines. This helps students manage their time and stay on track with their goals. Deadlines, they can be really motivating, especially when you set them for yourself. And step 5 is all about identifying resources. This is where the teacher kind of guides the students towards different resources that can help them learn. Could be anything from books and articles to online platforms, maybe even connecting them with experts in their field. It's like giving them a treasure map to this huge world of knowledge. And finally, step 6 is finding mentors for feedback. So this might involve connecting students with people who can give them guidance and encouragement, maybe some constructive criticism. It's about building a support system that goes beyond the classroom.
Wow. This is really highlighting the importance of relationships and connections in the learning process. I love that. These frameworks, they sound really valuable, but I'm guessing they're not one-size-fits-all solutions, right?
You're exactly right. The great thing about these frameworks is that they're not, rigid recipes. Yeah. They're more adaptable guides, Yeah. They can be tailored to the specific needs of the learners and the learning environment.
Yeah, that's really important because, everyone learns differently and everyone has different interests, right? So Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, but I'm eager to hear more about how all of this actually plays out in real classrooms. Like what does it look like in practice?
It's sometimes hard to picture how all this actually looks in a real classroom. All right, so let's make it more concrete. Imagine like a high school history class studying World War II. Now, in a typical setup, you'd have everyone reading the same textbook, taking the same tests. But with a self-directed approach, things get way more interesting.
Okay, I'm already picturing those like dusty textbooks being tossed aside. So tell me more. What happens instead?
Well, instead of lectures, this teacher decided to turn her students into like historical detectives. She split the class into small groups, and each group got to choose a specific part of the war to really dive into. So some groups, they might focus on, I don't know, like major battles, others on what was happening on the home front, and others on the impact of propaganda. It's like everyone's got their own little piece of the puzzle to explore.
That sounds so much more like engaging than just memorizing dates and names and stuff.
Yeah.
Did the students get into it? Like, were they actually excited about this?
Oh, totally. They were like all over it. They were digging into primary sources, interviewing veterans, even creating like interactive maps and timelines. And their final presentations were amazing. I mean, one group made a documentary about women on the home front, and another built a whole website exploring the ethics of the atomic bomb.
Wow, those are some like really impressive results, and I bet they learned way more than they would have from just like passively reading a textbook, right?
Yeah, exactly. The teacher was really amazed by how deeply they understood the material, but what was really cool was that the students themselves said they felt like a sense of ownership and pride in what they learned. It wasn't just about grades anymore, it was about their own like pursuit of knowledge.
I love that.
Oh.
Okay, I'm ready for another inspiring example. Hit me.
All right. So this time let's go to an elementary school classroom.
Right.
Imagine a bunch of like super passionate kids who are all about saving the environment.
Yeah. Kids have so much energy for that, like they really want to make the world a better place. So what did they do?
Their teacher decided to tap into that passion, right? So she created a self-directed project all about environmental sustainability. Instead of just learning about recycling and conservation, in theory, they got to tackle a real world problem. So
they became little activists. I love it. What issue did they choose to focus on?
Well, the teacher started by having a brainstorming session, and the kids were full of ideas. They talked about pollution in their local park, the impact of climate change, even like endangered species. But in the end, they voted to focus on reducing plastic waste in their school cafeteria.
That's a great choice, because it's something they see every day. Right. So they're really invested in finding a solution. What did they do next?
So first, they set this big, ambitious goal, which was to cut the use of plastic utensils and straws in the cafeteria by like 50% within a month. Then they divided themselves into teams, each with like a specific job to do.
So it's like a little environmental task force.
Exactly. One team researched alternative materials, another designed posters and flyers to, raise awareness, and then a third team actually presented their findings to the principal and the cafeteria staff. They really took ownership of the whole thing.
I bet there were some bumps along the way, though, right? Like challenges they had to overcome.
Of course. I mean, some students felt a little overwhelmed by all the research, and others had trouble, working together effectively in their teams. But this is where the teacher's guidance was so important. She helped them, figure out problems, gave them extra resources, and helped the teams communicate better. So she was like their support system, but she never took over or told them what to do.
Right. It's about giving them the tools and letting them find their own solutions.
Yeah.
So did they reach their goal?
They did. The school cafeteria actually did reduce their plastic usage significantly. And the students were so excited to see their efforts, make a real difference. And they learned so much more than just environmental science. They picked up valuable skills in teamwork, communication, problem solving, leadership.
Those are like life skills, That'll serve them well no matter what they do. It's amazing how self-directed learning can empower even, young kids to become agents of change.
Yeah, for sure. And these are just a couple of examples, right? There are so many more out there showing how powerful this approach can be across different ages and subjects. It's happening in schools, workplaces, community centers, online.
It's like a whole new way of thinking about learning, right? Putting the power back in the hands of the learners.
Exactly. And as we move forward, it's important to address some of the concerns and criticisms about this approach, to make sure it's actually beneficial for everyone.
Makes sense. I mean, self-directed learning sounds great, but I'm sure there are people who have doubts. So what are some of the main criticisms you've come across?
Well, one common worry is that, without a structured curriculum, self-directed learners might miss out on some basic knowledge or skills. People are afraid they'll end up with gaps in their understanding, or they won't develop certain skills that are, considered important by traditional standards.
Yeah, that's a valid concern. Are they getting a well-rounded education if they're just choosing their own path all the time?
For sure, but here's the thing. Self-directed learning doesn't mean abandoning all structure. It's about finding that balance, between freedom and guidance.
So how do we make sure that students are getting that foundational knowledge while still having the space to explore what they're interested in?
Well, it starts with clearly defining the learning outcomes for any self-directed experience. What are the specific things students should know, the skills they should have, the competencies they should develop. It's not about letting them just wander around aimlessly, right? There needs to be a destination in mind.
Okay, so a sense of purpose. But does that mean we have to go back to traditional tests to see how they're doing?
Not necessarily. Assessment can take a lot of different forms, right? It could be projects, presentations, portfolios, even self-reflections. The important thing is to find ways to measure learning that actually match up with the goals of the self-directed experience.
Right. Keep it interesting and relevant for the students. What are some other ways to address those concerns about, those knowledge gaps?
Well, one thing is providing access to mentors and resources. That could be as simple as giving them a list of books and articles and websites, or as involved as connecting them with experts in their field of interest,
Yeah, building a support system that goes beyond the classroom.
Exactly. And lastly, it's really important to create a culture of feedback and reflection. We need to give students opportunities to share their work, get constructive criticism, and figure out, where they might need more help.
So it's about helping them become more self-aware and learn how to evaluate their own progress.
Yeah.
Okay, so what other criticisms have you heard about self-directed learning?
Another big one is that not all learners are ready for that level of autonomy, right? Especially younger students who might need more structure and guidance.
Right. That brings us back to student readiness, doesn't it?
Exactly. It's crucial to figure out where each student is in their development and provide different levels of support. For some, we might need to start with more structure and then gradually give them more autonomy as they gain confidence and skills.
Right. Like that bike analogy you used before. You wouldn't just expect someone to ride on their own without learning the basics first.
Exactly. And for students who are already comfortable with self-direction, we can give them more freedom and flexibility. It's all about finding that right balance for each individual.
So it's all about finding that balance, like you said, between structure and freedom. But I imagine that takes a lot of time and effort, right, from both the teachers and the students.
Yeah, you're right. That's definitely another criticism that comes up. People point out that this approach can be pretty demanding. Teachers have to really shift their mindset and put in the work to understand each student as an individual. And students, they got to be willing to take more responsibility, for their own learning.
So it's not like some magic solution that makes everything easy.
Yeah.
It's a commitment, right?
Exactly. But I really do believe the benefits are worth it. When learners have the power to actually shape their education, they become more engaged, they're more motivated, and they're really invested in what they're learning. And that can lead to, deeper understanding. They remember things better, and they might even develop a lifelong love of learning.
Yeah, that would be amazing. And I guess we can't expect any approach to be totally perfect and easy. There are always going to be challenges. But are there ways to make this whole self-directed learning thing, more manageable?
Absolutely. For one thing, we can use technology, right, to streamline some of the logistical stuff, like tracking student progress, giving feedback, and there are tons of online resources and communities that can, support both teachers and students.
So it's about finding the right tools and the right strategies, right? And remembering that it's a journey, not, a destination.
Exactly. There's no one right way to do this. It's all about experimenting and adapting as you go along. I mean, we're all constantly learning and changing, right? And the way we approach education should reflect that.
This has been a really eye-opening conversation. I feel like I have a whole new understanding of what learning can be.
Me too. It's pretty exciting to think about all the possibilities, right? When we empower students to take charge of their own learning.
Yeah. And I think the main takeaway here is that self-directed learning, it's not just about, letting students do whatever they want. It's about creating a real partnership between teachers and students where everyone is actively involved.
Couldn't agree more. It's about fostering that love of learning that'll stay with them, for their whole lives.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of self-directed learning. I hope our listeners feel inspired to maybe try some of these ideas out in their own learning journeys, whether they're, students or educators or just people who love to learn.
It's been a pleasure. And remember, the journey of learning, it's a personal one. Embrace your curiosity, trust your instincts, and never stop exploring.
That's great advice. And to our listeners, we'll see you next time.